So the point to keep in mind is that they need to be questions which, from the perspective of the interviewer, you're getting right to the heart of what's going on in the organization. And you don't need a lot of these. You don't want to actually make it look like you're grilling the person or grilling the company, but going back to creating that image that you're in it to find a good fit, then you want to show some offensive questions. So I wanted to give you some types of questions that you might ask. And you might not, if you're listening live, you might not have to take the time to write all of these down. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly, but you can listen to the replay and take notes on them later. So here's some that I recommend. I'm just throwing this out. You need to be creative with them and make them relevant to the company that you're talking with, the job that you're seeking. But here's some that I recommend to my clients. So, for instance, does the CEO have a strong conviction about the approach needed to meet your goals in this particular area? Or how closely does research and development and the sales work on new projects together? And I'm just throwing these out. They may not be relevant, or they may be relevant. Or do you have a strong team in place, or will you expect me to recruit my own team? Or, do you have the new capabilities to achieve your goals? And if you don't, would I be given a free hand to do that, or would that cause political problems? Or is top management, is executive leadership unanimous on how to accomplish your top goals? Or are there strong differences of opinion? Or possibly, if it's a small firm that's growing, which of course you would know from your research, and you can also do research on Hoovers, by the way, and those are usually mid to large-sized businesses, but you can find some good financial information from hoovers.com. But you could say something like, would you see the major thrust of your growth as positioning the firm for a public offering or as an acquisition or a merger? And also, just as a side note, if that's true and they are positioning themselves, then you need to, if you do get the job, negotiate equity for that company. In other words, if you're willing to take a lower base salary, possibly you could get some stock options or some stock grants, because I have seen consistently the people that I work with that have taken some equity stake in the company, even if it's small. When the company gets acquired or a company merges with another company or goes public, they can sell those stock shares or turn those in if they're stock options, and you can really build wealth very quickly. So that's really something to consider. It's something that I really stress to my clients in negotiating. You need to get some equity in the company, even if it's a small amount. Okay, so another question I thought of, really the last one that I've got listed here is, for instance, given the fact that you're number 3 in the market right now, what's the timetable for improving that future? Or do you have strategies in place in order to make yourself number 2 or improving market share? And then you don't have to be in sales or business development to ask that, because you're talking about the health of the company. You really want to show that you're concerned with making it a right fit for you.
Wow, Tammy, those are some great questions. And would you want to tailor these to the company you're interviewing with, right? That's the whole process.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it goes back to researching the company and using that research in your questions. Absolutely.
So let's do a recap on the 5 techniques for building chemistry that we've gone over so far. We have, number 1, researching the firm and the hiring manager. Number 2, impressing the front office. Number 3, projecting the right image. Number 4, paying compliments, which I think is huge, especially if if you're looking to at least have a chance there. And then number 5, asking intelligent questions. So what's the last way to build chemistry? And I'm assuming that you've got a big one coming for us as being number 6.
I do, actually, I do. And that is building the chemistry while you're answering the questions. So there's something that you need to keep in mind. So many people feel when they go into an interview, especially at a high-level interview, that the interviewer is trying to find out something wrong about them, that they're trying to break them, if you will, find out their weaknesses, and that it's really an adversarial type relationship. And that's not the case at all. And if you've hired anybody, you know that this is true, that the interviewer wants to hire you. I mean, they really want to find somebody that can do the job, and they want to find that person in a minimum amount of time. So really, one of the secrets is to have the understanding that they really want to hire you. They're hoping that you're the right person and that they can finish all of this interviewing and get on with hiring somebody and get them started into the position. That really is what it's all about. So the way that you answer questions has more to do with building chemistry than just what you say. So I wanted to give you the advice of what I give my clients on how to answer that really important first question, which is, so tell me about yourself. You know, because a lot of people don't know what to say. I know I was working with one client who was a web content provider, and her answer to that was, well, I knew I wanted to be a writer in 6th grade. That's going back a little too far, and sure, it shows some passion. I can understand that, but you're giving way too much information. An employer really wants to know, what's in it for me? What can this person do for me? So you need to make that answer relatively concise and really framed on what's in it for them. What can you do for them, and why are you here? So to answer the question, so tell me about yourself. Here's what I recommend, that you give a brief overview of your background and really make it just 1 or 2 sentences. And try to keep it to 1 or 2 breaths or 10 seconds. 1 or 2 sentences, 1 or 2 breaths. For instance, even though my career or even though my degree's in psychology, I've spent most of my career in operations, a majority of that with American Century, but also with some small companies. And most recently, I've been in the career field, working for the largest executive firm in the business. And then in the last 3 years, I've been working for myself. That's a little long. I would even shorten it a little bit more to I've had over 15 years of experience in operations and most recently in helping people find a job quickly. So there's your 10-second answer. And then you say, as a result of that experience, I feel my strengths lie in, or as a result of that experience, I feel that I'm very strong at. And then you list maybe 3 things, 2 or 3 things that you feel are your core strengths, because that really helps define you very quickly in front of an employer. So make sure that if you give those strengths, you've got specific stories to back those strengths up, because after you list those strengths, I would want you to say, would you like to know about any of those in more detail? Or which of those would you like to talk about first, if you feel like you're bold enough to say it that way? So, for instance, you could say, I've got an MBA with an emphasis in marketing. I have actually been in marketing all of my career with over 15 years of experience. Most recently, I was with Sprint, where I was a director of marketing in charge of 200 people. As a result of that experience, I feel my strengths lie in being able to take a product from inception through rollout and market it to the right people, and also in market research and doing a lot of strategic market research, competitive research for the product. And if you're going into a different industry, I do recommend that the last thing that you say is that, if this is true, is that, and I learn quickly, and I've always been able to contribute to the bottom line very quickly. And then you say, would you like to know about any of these in more detail? Or which of these would you like to talk about first? When you do that, you're really showing a command of the conversation, and what you're doing very quickly after this answer, this first answer, is guiding the conversation towards your strengths, which is exactly what you want them to be talking about. Now, I'm also assuming that you have what I would call SOAR stories or STAR stories or STAR stories, where you set up the situation in a few sentences, you give the action that you took, and the quantifiable result. The O in there is if you're able to give the opportunity that it presented. But you always want to have that quantifiable result. That's really the most important thing, to share those accomplishments. And hopefully those quantifiable results are in your resume. So when you answer those questions, you want to gear your comments to potential contributions for them related to sales or profits or cost reduction or innovations. And so it's important to focus not only on what you've done, but also throughout the interview, focus on how that translates into what you can do for them. Because you don't want to take for granted that they can that they can connect the dots. So if you hear something in the conversation that you feel you could contribute to as far as any kind of movement or any kind of push towards something that you feel you could do something for, then bring that up and make it very relevant to what they're looking for. Also, I think that you need to be comfortable with silence. And I know a lot of people, especially salespeople, like to continue talking if there's silence. They don't like that silence. And especially with a phone interview, you don't know if that person is thinking of other questions. You don't know if they're taking notes. Be comfortable with that silence. But at the same time, if the silence gets too long and a little too awkward, then that's a good time to pull out one of those questions that you came up with in advance. And I also want to let you know that in an executive interview, it is okay to have those questions typed up on put in a portfolio, so that you open the portfolio, you've got a copy of your resume, you've given them a copy of your resume, and then you also have some questions that you've prepared in advance. You don't have to have those memorized. It's not a school play. So you can have those questions. To me, if I'm hiring somebody at an executive level, I'm going to be very impressed that they took the time to come up with some very intelligent questions. So the key is to create an opportunity to demonstrate your knowledge, to demonstrate the research that you've done. But being prepared also builds confidence and allows you to be more spontaneous. You know, that's a really big deal because a lot of people feel, even at a very high level, at a six-figure level, that they have to memorize 206 most common questions and figure out what an employer wants to hear, and that's really not what it's about. That makes you very nervous, and you're trying to remember how to answer each question. That doesn't really prepare you for a real interview. You need to know what you want to say about you. You know, and of course you want to maintain the eye contact and the firm handshake and all of that, but you need to establish your sincerity and your integrity. And above all, the questions that you answer have to project a consistent message relevant to what your resume says, what's out there about you online, like your LinkedIn profile, or any other communication that you might have with a potential employer. That's your brand. Keep in mind you always have a brand, a brand is nothing more than what other people see you as. And also, you're selling yourself. So don't ever try to answer a question based upon what you think the interviewer wants to hear. You need to stay true to yourself because that will ensure that if you get the position, it's a good fit. And so, you know, you'll often hear me say, don't try to fit your square peg into their round hole because you'll end up being unhappy in that position.